The Johannesburg High Court has issued an order, to the City of Joburg, giving it 3 months to improve the living conditions of the Marshalltown fire survivors. The victims were moved to a new temporary settlement in Denver. The City of Joburg installed 150 shacks there with only one tap for all occupants. That's at least reports from the site itself. The site was initially earmarked for JMPD's pound for non-roadworthy vehicles. The group is part of those who have been affected by the fire in Usindiso building that claimed 76 lives back in August this year. Let's get your sense of the way forward. Bring in Cilliers, who's the Director for Executive Support in the Human Settlements Department in the City of Joburg, and joins us now via our video link. Charles, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for your time. So what's the city's response to this? Are you going to comply, or do you reckon you're going to appeal?
Look, if you read the order that was handed down, it actually says there's a correction there in handwritten text saying that it's by agreement between the parties. So the city has agreed to do this so that there can't be an appeal.
All right, so within 3 weeks, we're told, but there's also been concerns in the lead-up to this landing up to court that despite the many promises at various levels of government, very few of them have actually come to fruition. In fact, civil society organizations telling us that they stepped in to fill in many of the gaps insofar as the needs are concerned for those victims.
In what sense are they stepping in, Ayanda?
Food.
If you don't mind just
Sure. Food, support. Some of them have been crying about not being able to afford going to mortuaries because of where the site itself is. Concerns around safety, especially for women and children there who feel that they've largely been unattended. Those are just some of the things top of mind that some of these civil society organizations raised.
Sure, I understand what you mean now. Look, I think that it's fair to say that as government we simply can't do everything. We've never said that we can. We've never claimed that. We do have limited resources. That building was hijacked, as you know. It's horrific what happened there. I was there for all the days, on the day and past that. And it was a horrific scene. But the fact is that it was hijacked by criminal syndicate thugs. And they were charging rent there, and the socioeconomic conditions around that building and everything that happened there are beyond the ability of just one city to fix. So, of course, we need all the help we can get, and we're doing the best we can with the limited resources we have right now to try to deal with the aftermath of this tragedy.
Would you agree, though, that the city has fallen short of being able to provide even the most minimum needs of these residents, given the conditions that we've been told they're living under in this temporary shelter?
So I think that's an interesting debate to have. I think it's a big debate because the city has temporary emergency accommodation that it's supposed to be using in cases of disaster like fire and floods and so on, as well as to accommodate people who get evicted from private buildings. And there's many hijacked buildings throughout the city. The city is currently looking at over 180. There's probably more. So we need way more temporary emergency accommodation because the city's policies actually only allow us to house people on a temporary basis while more long-term solutions are found for them in the housing space. But at the moment, all of our temporary emergency accommodation is already overflowing. It's oversubscribed. So we have done basically the only thing that we can do at this point, which is to erect these shacks. That's what they are. It's a shack village, really. And that meets the minimum criterion of shelter, which the NGOs have in the past recognized as a valid living space. Because when you try to evict people from shacks, then these very same NGOs come and prevent you and say, no, you can't evict these people, even if the conditions in those shacks are worse than the ones that we're currently providing. And I can also assure you, as somebody who has been to many of these hijacked buildings, that you may think that there's something that doesn't quite meet the eye at the places that we're taking these people now, but it is a far cry from the even worse conditions that people are living in hijacked buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and some people might say that you're almost stopping short of using NGOs as scapegoats here. And I suppose it's worth reflecting on how we arrived here to begin with. The NGOs are only pointing out what's stipulated in the laws of this country and the Constitution, that if you are to evict people who've been occupying certain buildings for a long time, you have to provide adequate alternative housing for them. It's not the NGO's fault that those people found shelter and were allowed to stay there for so long, because, let's face it, of lawlessness in the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think that takes us to a bigger debate around the Constitution in the country and the fact that property rights are not particularly respected in the country. And it differs from the situation in some other countries, but this law is a law that if you were to simulate this 100 different ways, you would probably find yourself in a similar situation here where, we find ourselves right now. So yes, the Constitution is written in a particular way. The Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act reinforces that, and it leaves us in an ever-increasing situation of having to provide housing to people from the state side, where we have a limited budget, and it becomes increasingly difficult for us to do. So, yeah, there's a constitutional debate to have here, and I think that's a bigger discussion. I'm not going to say that as the city that we're in a position where this is easy for us. It's not.
Sure. And, I suppose some people might ask questions about whose fault that is, right? Getting to this position was not an inevitability. If the laws in their current form were enforced from the very beginning, you don't land up in a situation which arguably is a bit difficult for the city to try and manage. Let me just hone in on what you've just mentioned about the Constitution. Are you then suggesting that there should be a change of the Constitution rather than an effort to implement the laws that already exist, which, if they're implemented correctly, could help stave off this crisis?
I'm not suggesting that. I think that what's happened is that there's an interpretation of the law that's been allowed to take root as the beginning and the end of the debate. And the Constitution is very clear that there must be a progressive realization of the right to housing, which is not quite the same as you must provide instant housing to everybody today. So the drafters of the Constitution understood that it's not possible to give everyone a home in a day. And it is a progressive challenge that we as government have to do better to realize. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit that there's an enormous shortfall in the provision that we've made. And if you look at places like China that have been more effective in providing shelter to their people, we should be learning from those lessons. And I think South Africa has fallen dismally short. But the Constitution nevertheless does not say that we should snap our fingers and give everyone a house in a day.
Very well. You've now been given 3 months by the courts to at least improve the living conditions of those who are taking shelter at this temporary shack village, as you've described it. What does that look like?
Look, we were always going to improve the things. This has been happening, as you can see, as a reaction to a disaster. So it's been happening in phases. We couldn't do everything in one go. And the provision of putting in prepaid electricity meters, even putting in the extra standpipes for more water, putting in more chemical toilets, those were things that were bound to happen in any case, which is why I wasn't there myself. I'm not an official of the city in the sense that I don't do operational work. I work in the MMC's office. So we play an oversight role. It's a political office. But as I understand it, the plan was always to improve the facility progressively over time. So that's why the city has absolutely no qualms with agreeing to this court order, because it is what we were going to do anyway.
Charles Cilliers, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Charles is with the Human Settlements Department in the City of Johannesburg. Once again, thanks for your time.